A love story begins. Kelly was a young woman full of life, always finding joy in the little things. She had a bright smile that could light up any room and a contagious laugh that could lift anyone's spirits. She was a devoted mother to her 3 young children, always putting their needs above her own. When she met Brian, she thought she had found the one, the person who would complete her life. He was charming and attentive, sweeping her off her feet with his kind gestures and loving words. They were married in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by loved ones, promising to love each other forever. Their future seemed full of promise, with dreams of a happy life together. Kelly's happiness was infectious. She radiated joy and positivity wherever she went. Brian was her soulmate, her partner, the father of her children. Life was good, and they felt blessed. Their early years together were filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the excitement of building a life together. They built a home and started a family, creating a warm and loving environment for their children. Kelly embraced motherhood with open arms, finding joy in every moment spent with her kids. Her children were her world, and she dedicated herself to their happiness and well-being. Brian seemed like a loving husband and father, always there to support and care for his family. He played with the kids, helped around the house, and made sure Kelly never felt alone in her responsibilities. To their friends and family, they seemed like the perfect couple, always happy and in love. Their love story was one that others envied, a seemingly ideal relationship that everyone admired. But beneath the surface, a darkness was slowly growing, hidden troubles that no one could see. As the years passed, subtle changes began to emerge in Brian's behavior. What started as minor quirks gradually became more pronounced, altering the dynamics of their relationship. He became increasingly possessive and controlling, monitoring Kelly's every move and questioning her constantly. Kelly's once carefree spirit started to dim. The joy and spontaneity that defined her began to fade under the weight of Brian's scrutiny. He would criticize her appearance and her parenting, making her feel inadequate and unworthy. He isolated her from her friends and family, making her dependent on him. The support system she once relied on was now out of reach. At first, Kelly dismissed these red flags as signs of stress or insecurity. She rationalized his behavior, hoping it was just a phase. She loved Brian and wanted to believe that things would get better. She clung to the hope that the man she fell in love with would return. But the emotional abuse continued to escalate. Brian's temper became unpredictable, and his outbursts more frequent. He would fly into rages over small things, leaving Kelly constantly on edge, never knowing what might set him off. Kelly walked on eggshells, terrified of setting him off. Her every action was calculated to avoid his wrath. The man who had once promised to love and cherish her was now a source of fear and intimidation. The warmth in his eyes had turned cold. She felt trapped and alone, with no one to turn to. The walls of her life were closing in, suffocating her spirit. Her dreams of a happy future were crumbling around her. The life she had envisioned was slipping away, replaced by a nightmare she couldn't escape. The love she had felt for Brian was slowly being replaced by fear and despair. The foundation of their relationship was cracking, and Kelly was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered world. Brian's controlling behavior extended to every aspect of Kelly's life, leaving her with little autonomy. He monitored her phone calls and emails, constantly accusing her of infidelity without any evidence. He dictated what she wore, choosing her outfits to suit his preferences, and controlled how she spent her time, leaving her with no freedom. Kelly was cut off from her support system, isolated and vulnerable, unable to reach out to friends or family. Her once vibrant social life was reduced to the confines of her own home, making her feel trapped and alone. She was a prisoner in her own life, with no escape from the constant surveillance and control. The fear she lived with was constant and suffocating, making it hard for her to breathe or think clearly. Brian's manipulation was subtle at first, then increasingly overt, as he tightened his grip on her life. He convinced her that she was worthless without him, eroding her sense of self-worth and independence. He chipped away at her self-esteem, eroding her confidence until she barely recognized herself. Kelly began to doubt herself, blaming herself for his abusive behavior, thinking she was the cause of their problems. The cycle of abuse tightened its grip, making it harder for her to see a way out. She felt powerless to escape, trapped in a life that seemed to have no exit. As Brian's control over Kelly intensified, his true nature became impossible to ignore. Incidents of physical abuse began to surface. A shove, a slap, a punch. Each act of violence was followed by apologies and promises to change. Kelly, desperate to believe him, clung to these glimmers of hope. She wanted to believe that the man she loved was still in there somewhere. The violence escalated in both frequency and intensity. Kelly lived in a constant state of fear, never knowing when the next outburst would occur. She hid the bruises from her family and friends, ashamed and terrified. Her silence became her prison. She was trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape the clutches of her abuser. Kelly's greatest fear was for her children. She witnessed the impact Brian's abuse was having on them. The once happy and carefree children were now withdrawn and fearful. Kelly knew she had to protect them, even if it meant risking her own safety. She began to secretly plan her escape. Finding the strength to leave an abuser is a monumental and terrifying task. Kelly knew that leaving would enrage Brian, putting her and her children in even greater danger. She needed a plan, a way to escape unnoticed and reach safety. She contacted a domestic violence hotline, whispering her story in hushed tones, terrified of being overheard. Kelly reached out for help, but her pleas were met with inadequate responses. The police were called on several occasions, but Brian was always able to charm his way out of trouble. Restraining orders were issued, but they proved ineffective in stopping him. The system that was supposed to protect her failed her at every turn. Kelly's story is a tragic reminder that domestic violence can happen to anyone, regardless of their socioeconomic status, race, or religion. It is a silent epidemic that thrives in the shadows, fueled by silence and shame. Kelly's story highlights the systemic failures that often leave victims vulnerable and unprotected. The news of Kelly's murder sent shockwaves through the community. Friends and neighbors expressed disbelief and horror. How could this have happened to someone they knew and loved? The community rallied around Kelly's family, offering support and condolences. Candlelight vigils were held in her memory, a somber reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence. Kelly's story became a catalyst for change. People began to talk more openly about domestic violence, raising awareness and demanding accountability. Her death served as a tragic reminder that we must do more to protect victims and hold abusers accountable for their actions. Brian was arrested and charged with Kelly's murder. The trial was a harrowing ordeal for Kelly's family, who were forced to relive the horrors she endured. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing the history of abuse and Brian's escalating violence. The jury found Brian guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the verdict brought a sense of closure, it could not erase the pain and loss felt by Kelly's loved ones. Her children would grow up without their mother, forever scarred by the trauma they witnessed. Kelly's legacy would live on, not only in the hearts of those who loved her, but also in the fight to end domestic violence. Kelly is remembered as a loving mother, a loyal friend, and a kind soul. Her infectious laugh and radiant smile continue to bring comfort to those who knew her. Her story serves as a reminder that we must never forget the victims of domestic violence. Their stories deserve to be told, their voices deserve to be heard. Kelly's legacy extends beyond her tragic death. Her story has inspired countless individuals to take action against domestic violence. From supporting local shelters to advocating for stronger laws, her memory fuels the fight for a world free from violence and abuse. Kelly's story teaches us that domestic violence can affect anyone. It knows no boundaries, crossing all socioeconomic, racial, and religious lines. It is essential to recognize the signs of abuse and to understand that it is never the victim's fault. We must believe survivors and offer them unwavering support. It is crucial to educate ourselves and others about the dynamics of domestic violence and the resources available to help victims. By fostering a culture of support and accountability, we can create a safer world for everyone. Kelly's story is a call to action. We must work together to end the cycle of domestic violence. This requires a multifaceted approach, including supporting domestic violence shelters and organizations, educating ourselves and others about domestic violence, advocating for stronger laws and policies, and creating a culture of respect and equality. Kelly's story is a tragedy, but it is also a call to action. By working together, we can create a world where everyone is safe from violence and abuse. We owe it to Kelly, to her children, and to all victims of domestic violence to ensure that their stories are heard and that their lives are honored through our commitment to ending this epidemic.